what attracted you to this particular project first?
So I'm fifth generation Chinese American. My grandfather was born in California, and I'm originally from Oakland, California. So my family has a lot of really deep roots in California. But being from the Bay Area, it's really popular to rep your culture, and I felt like with my Chinese culture, it was definitely a different version than most families who are more first or second generation. And so the way I identified was different than how people at my school would identify with. So I felt a little bit left out, and I felt like I didn't really belong with the Asian kids at my school. So the story is very much based on myself growing up in Oakland and just kind of figuring out like what is my cultural identity. And the only thing that I kind of surmised is just that the cultural identity that I did have is, from being from the Bay and being from Oakland and being from here. And, you know, so the identity that the character portrays is just that of what the Oakland culture looks and feels like, and that's like a big part of the story. um and I think as a journey for a 16-year-old, you don't really know who you are, where you are. I didn't know until maybe later after college. So I think that the bookend with the grandmother is kind of that moment of you have culture and you have your family. You don't need anything physical or, whether it's language or food or anything, it doesn't need to be so prescriptive. It doesn't need to be this one physical thing. It just is who you are. And that's a lesson I didn't really learn until like later in my 20s.
Okay. And I thought about that. Something that I also like thought about you is just like the just close up, this not very intimate, kind of a lot of intimate moments. I felt like in the film to progress the story along as instead of just like showing or whatever. So like with the way that it tied in, with with the beginning and then with the end after she obviously had the fight and everything, just in terms of I'm almost thought like a pain, and just kind of like a cultural like just kind of release or comfort, with that we're always here. So I thought that that was really special. Was that something that was like intentional or just a part of your style in terms of just kind of really, because I did kind of feel like you told a lot more through imagery, which I love because that's something that I'm trying to do more of. Is that something that's just like more of like just your style that we will see more of, or something that just with this particular storyline was just easier to tell in that manner?
Oh, like heavily like visual, observational.
Yeah, like a lot of things with it, because particularly when you're doing a short story and you're looking at like 15 or 16 minutes, you're fighting with what clips you use and what clips you don't,
Right.
right? And so even looking at certain things like with the eggs, with like the stove, with the gaslighting,
Mhm.
with taking the radio out, right? So I was like, I
Yeah,
was watching
it's
that
very
with
Oakland.
my son. Yeah,
The
that was
pop in the radio is very like 90s, 2000s, like nostalgia.
oh, it was all right there for me. So, because I don't want to age
People who
myself,
know it
but
laugh
yeah, no, no, I'm above
in the
you.
theater.
I think, yeah. So
Yeah.
so I actually, we were viewing it with my son, and he was like, oh, it's an old car, and I was like, yeah, it's probably an old car, but yeah, it tells about the neighborhood, and just like
Exactly, because we
about
get your car
you
radio
don't
stolen
want to get it
all the
stolen.
time.
Yeah, I said they took their chain box, the chain
Yeah,
1, 2 in
you
there.
gotta take the face off. It's so funny
Yeah,
because we'll go out to where we're supposed to go, and they're like, "Oh my god, do we take the face off?"
yeah, but then.
Like,
But
oh shit, we have to go back.
exactly. But it's like visual and subtle ways of telling you
Yeah,
that tells you right there the neighborhood she lives in. It
yeah.
tells a lot of the storyline without having to just like diarrhea of the mouth, kind of
Yeah,
with just
that's actually my sister's actual car. It's a 1999 Toyota
so
Camry.
amazing.
I had a 99 Camry back in the day too, but I since have a different one. But that's my sister's car, and when I first wrote it, I of course wrote that car into the film. But I was like, it has to be a part of the scene because it's such a quick way to talk about Oakland and like you said, the neighborhoods without even saying anything, and the people who know it and the audience will laugh. but the younger people just don't know what we're talking about, or people who I guess have had the
Yeah.
car stolen. They don't know.
It's the moment. PSA. That's what I said. I'm like, okay, this is the PSA moment. We're gonna take
Yeah.
it. I'm gonna do it myself. This is your PSA moment. No, that's when we want our radios, because the radio might be worth more than that's. But I told him
Yeah, I know.
more than the car.
Yeah. We
That
get
boy.
our cars jacked all the time.
Yeah. Okay. So that's cool to know. I'll definitely like figure out like some cool way to incorporate that.
Yeah, it's funny that you had your son talk.
But you look like a baby, so it's like you're talking to me like about these like old school things, and it's like you look
that's so funny
and everything.
Well, I have this new skin regimen, so I'm glad I look like a kid, but no, it's
You might need to send it over, you know. I mean, they always say, you know, we don't crack, but you know,
I know.
listen, but it doesn't mean that we can't use other things and incorporate it in it and smooth it out or whatever. Sometimes it might need smoothing, even though if it don't crack, right? So
a little bit timing's okay. Yeah.
Hey, let's get with it. So I digress.
Yes.
As you can see, I can.
But to your question, to answer your question, my background is in music videos. When I was a kid, I started making films at 15, 16, and I watched like Ludacris and Missy Elliott music videos. So I wanted to be Dave Myers, and I wanted to like make really cool visual stuff. So a lot of the stuff that I was making when I was a kid was more like music videos and like music documentaries. I wanted to make like MTV kind of stuff. And so when I went to college, I studied cinematography because I just want to be behind the camera, even though I was directing. I always felt like my visual style was so important to me. So when writing my first screenplay, I didn't know how to write dialogue, and it really intimidated me. And I think it kind of shows in certain areas, because this is my first screenplay. And so when I was writing the film, I do think of visuals first before dialogue. And it's interesting that you pointed it out that it's more visual than it's just like this, a lot is said without being said.
I mean, that's what I've always been told. It's always better to be than to tell. Yeah. I mean, I think that's a great thing that you know was done with it. That's why I pointed it out.
I think also too, as an emotion, also too, like emotionally, I'm not that like I'm very guarded. And so I think when you're a kid too, you don't say like, that made me feel bad. Like you just kind of like sit and like stew in your emotions. And I feel it's very appropriate for the age range because we don't have the emotional intelligence to really say how you feel. It's either lashing out and saying something that has nothing to do with anything, or just sitting really quiet and just like looking at people and thinking a whole lot of things. And so I felt like for the teenage experience, it is more observational. And because it's my story, I felt like the main character is a person that does observe the most, and allowing the other characters to kind of like interplay and allow her to react. That being said, I think she has the least amount of lines. I think Stephanie has the most lines too, because Stephanie kind of guides it a lot more. I think that she's more of a character that really changes the course of the story a lot more than the main character.
Yeah, no, I definitely get listen, and I will tell you this as the mother of an 8-year-old girl, it's not just the teens. Like, oh, she is fine. Girls are just different too, especially.
Yeah, teenagers are different.
But she's only 8. She's not even a teenager. She's just like, you know, even so.
Yeah, kids are different these days than back when we were kids, and I think like it's also harder to cast for high school students, even in other projects, because I was casting for a diner scene, and it was just like 2 high school students like chatting and eating French fries, but the way that they act is so much more mature and like pretty girl swagger than it is just like loud and obnoxious. And I grew up more like the loud and obnoxious version, or just like kind of talking and blowing shit. But then they're like so put together and and just like, oh, there's the loss of innocence and the loss of like it of just like having no inhibitions. We don't see that in kids anymore. They're now so subconscious, and so I mean we were too, but I think that it's really hard to get that back. It's really hard to get younger talent to understand what that feels like, you know, growing up in the 90s and early 2000s. It's just a culture.
So one of the other things, and the reason is part Dominican. I don't speak Spanish, you know. I don't really have engagement with that side, you know, of her family, but she is, you know, that's a part of who she is. And I often think about that, you know, and how I can like figure out a way to, expose her to that
Mhm.
culture. But I also know because she has maybe a lighter skin tone and she's going to school with kids, there are going to be obstacles and challenges and stuff that she faces, even though she's the same. Because look at
Mhm.
me, she's the same, right? And so, you know, what was that something that you thought about, in terms of like telling this story, and something that you were passionate about in terms of just bridging the gap, and that can open up the door to just conversations
Right.
about like parallels that people aren't necessarily thinking about day to day, as opposed to just looking at, no, 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 well, she won't understand,
Right,
you know
right,
what
right.
I mean, kind of
Yeah.
thing.
I mean, first of all, I think the whole Asian hate that had happened during the coronavirus pandemic days has been really saddening, and how it
Yeah.
has divided the cultures. That being said, I did write this screenplay in 2018, so it was way before all the whole movement happened. But that wasn't actually a conscious thing. I think that the reason why it comes off authentic is because those are my authentic friends. And so the unity comes from more within, if that's a cheesy way to say it. But those were, I mean, we went to prom. I went to prom with my teammates. I didn't go with the Asian kids. So like they were my friends at school. So it made more sense that that was like you saw the team in a way that was like a friendship group. But for I made this film more to tell my Asian American experience, because I felt like a lot of stories are portrayed Asian Americans as being like quote unquote like foreigners, or like I'm not accepted in the Asian American culture, Asian American culture, or I don't understand, like they don't see me as being an American. But I think I had the opposite. I don't think that anyone thought of me being that way. I always felt pretty American, and I don't think anyone questioned it.
Mhm.
But also the girls on my team didn't care I was Asian. I was the only Asian girl on the team for a year, not the years after. But they didn't care. They cared if you were a good player. Like that's really why
Yeah.
Stephanie shits on her, which actually I feel really awful, because Stephanie is actually a girl on the freshman team that I played with. I knew her in high school, and she was always so nice. She was never mean to me. I think like the reason why I used her and her name in her memory is because she was a type of girl that to me was really popular, knew everybody. Her cousin is like extremely talented. I went to middle school with her. She ended up playing for the Harlem Globetrotters for a couple of years, but they were like really popular girls. And I remember Stephanie moved on to varsity, but Stephanie was always nice to me. And that memory of like one of the cool girls, one of the popular girls being so nice to me, I think that really attaches my memory to like what it felt like to be on the team, to feel like, oh, I feel a little invisible, but this one girl is really nice to me. And so I unfortunately use like her name, her memory in that way. But that's just kind of some of my experiences on the team. That being said, I had other friends that I really did hang out with on the team that, were closer, that we all played JV together. But I didn't really spend that much time with the Asian kids. And I feel like the way that it's portrayed in the film is pretty much the dynamic. Like I'll see them sometimes during lunch,
Mhm.
but sometimes not. Like I sometimes don't even see my teammates. I'll maybe just eat by myself. Like it's definitely like awkward feeling of I don't know where I belong or where I should go. But I like that the takeaway is that it feels like there are no lines and that there's nothing dividing us. And maybe it's just because I didn't feel that way when I was growing up, so it wouldn't come across on screen.
That's wonderful. And I'm just writing my notes, but I know I have the
Yeah.
recording. So that leads me into what's next. Like, so are we going to turn this into a feature? Longer length?
Yeah,
I do
I
feel
would love
like there's
to.
a lot of storyline there.
Yeah.
So are you looking to like kind of grow this into like being a full length like feature like story or TV show? Like kind of like what are you thinking about in terms of like just the next path for this story, but then also just for yourself, in
Right.
terms of like creatively and
Yeah.
directly, in terms of your writing, everything that you are doing. What do we need to look out for?
Well, I love that you said that. I'm excited to kind of expand this story into a longer form project, possibly in television. I think like it'd be a great series because there's so much to talk about when it comes to culture. I think it's important to show this side of American culture, like the Bay Area, but it's also important to describe what Asians are like in the Bay Area and how they're so different. Like there are so many like diversity within the whole diaspora of the Asian American experience. and whether it's like the Filipino Asian kids or the San Leandro like kids with the rice rockets, like everyone has like so many different subcultures, but at the same time we all don't really get along or we all do get along at some point. So I think it's just kind of breaking down the stereotype that we're all the same. But at the same time, it's so great to like talk about Oakland culture, because I think like it describes like why there isn't a divide. Like of course there isn't, because when you kind of grow up you don't think that way. Some kids do. I mean, some, of course, in other schools have like a lot of different issues when it comes to race, but I didn't. And I think that's important to show, where it's not like very in your face. It's like, we're already here. We're already equals. And so now what? So I would love to kind of expand on the storylines and talking about their friendships and how it grows and whatnot. So yeah, we'll see what happens with that. Otherwise, we're Oscar qualified, so we apply to the Oscars this year and hope
I
to get
saw that.
So we'll hopefully...
I'm not going to show the toes, but I got a cross for you.
Yes, cross your fingers and toes of hopefully we'll get shortlisted. I think it'd be really great to show like an Asian American story like this be recognized on a grander scheme. So that's definitely the hope. But otherwise, yeah, just keeping on developing a couple things, and stories are always kind of rooted within my experiences of growing up in the Bay, whether it be about myself or anybody else. And so there are a couple other projects I'm thinking of. But yeah, I definitely just look for the same kinds of stories of diverse storytelling, and this is one of many.
Okay, and this is going to be my last one. And
of course, say anything. Yeah.
Just kind of like, what kind of advice, because I always like to like end off or
okay to suck for a little bit. Everyone does. There's plenty of people that are like on in the spotlight. You'll never see their first project, so just keep that in mind and keep on shooting, and eventually the consistency is what will make you successful, not just that one project. Like, this is my first short film, but it's not my first film. I've been filming since I was 16, but you'll never see the things I've done when I was like a teenager. It's like, good Lord, I would never show those things. I don't want to show things 5 years ago.
One day.
Oh God, I hide all of the videos. It's so embarrassing.
You have to do a thing. You have to do
something
special. Maybe for your family one day.
Just think of it like your old like middle school photos. Like, you're like, oh my God, don't look.
That's what the fan base would want. Okay? I'll be the servant of your fan club, and I will request that we get those like all those middle school videos.
But that's just to encourage. The only way I would ever show like old stuff that's really humiliating is if it encourages other people to be equally as bad at their first round. Mm-hmm. I've done things because I was experimenting, and the only way I knew it wasn't a good idea is because I had to go through it. Mm-hmm. And that's just me. I learned from a lot of mistakes, and I have to go through the mistake and eat the embarrassment to be like, okay, don't do that anymore. And so it just took years of building to say like, okay, every single project I learned something new. Even after Americanized and even after it is Oscar qualified, I learned so much that the next project I'm not going to do that anymore. And so it's always something that you have to learn from a project. You just got to shoot that project first. Mm-hmm. And the only second thing that I'll leave with is that when I was young and a teenager, I thought I was the only Asian girl that wanted to direct. But as I gotten older, it's so not true. I think all of us think that we're the only ones. And then I got into the industry. I still felt like, where is everybody? Because no one's really made it yet. Mm-hmm. But as I've gotten older, and now Instagram is a thing, mm-hmm. I've met, so I can count like 10 women, 10 Asian women that are like so incredible that it intimidates me. But that's great. Like, I'm in a really great community of women, Asian women too, who are killing it, and like, I want to be like them, and what I would say is like, find your peers. Don't just think to network upward, network laterally. Find the people that feel like they have the same kind of style as you, the same kind of community as you, and build it. Reach out to them, say hello, I want to do this, what's your advice? Follow their journey. Everyone loves a compliment, so whenever you hit them up, they'll always give you advice. I do that too. Like, I hit up everybody, and I also follow, where do they go to school, what do they do after school, what kind of projects do they do. Of course, you'll never see the mistakes, and so there's always a gap between school and where they are now. So like, that's always a mystery, but just ask them questions like, were you working in a coffee shop, or were you always a writer? What were you doing before this? So there are people like you out there, especially women of color, in the industry, and so you just got to find them and say hello.
I think that is amazing. I always say that I took the scenic route in life. I had to see more to be the
Hmm.
person that, but I'm happy with where I am. And so I
Right.
think that's like kind of similar. So I think that's great. The other thing that I will say, I know you're a part of a lot of great communities with these Asian women that you're aspiring to, but don't be afraid to start your own community with these Asian women that are aspiring
Yeah.
to you. I'm just saying, with your business, with
I
your business.
actually,
Because you
I've
have
met.
great energy and stuff there, just that's just like sidebar for you too. No, you have really like I like, you have really good like energy. I come from a sales and marketing background.
Oh,
Like
great.
anytime I see like, but I mean, that's definitely, something that you can not only make an impact with, but also just kind of expand like everything that you're doing.
Mhm.
Um, but like, yeah, it's been amazing. Thank you so much.
Yeah, no, thank you. And I think it's I always love filmmakers. I love talking to filmmakers, and I always have this like dream of doing like a monthly dinner with like 5 directors that I admire, whether it's like it's just underrepresented directors. So you could be a male of color or whatever. Um, but we show each other's work because I'm a fan. So I'll pick their work, I'll screen it
Mhm,
to them, and they get to meet each other. And I think that's really important. Like we're all talking about laterally and all's like network. It doesn't have to be like an Asian American woman, it could be anybody.
mhm,
And I have friends in all different like spaces, of course, and
mhm.
so I think it's really important to have their own, like everyone should do that. Everyone should screen work together and talk about film together, because that's how communities are built, and that's how you're able to like ask for advice, like how did you get into that fellowship, because what we're looking for are the small stepping stones, not the large ones that we see, like big people like Melina Matsoukas or Alma
Mhm.
Harral. It's like, oh God, what was your like mini steps before you became
Yeah,
Melina and Alma?
crawl before you walk. Like, yeah.
I know. It's like you
Huh?
didn't
Huh?
just like come out doing Rihanna music videos. Like, what were you doing before
Yeah,
the Rihanna music videos? What were the mistakes there?
yeah.
Like, what? How many years did you like? I always wondered. I met her before, and so I should have asked her more. And that's on my part. That's me being too shy to ask somebody else. So I definitely can dish out the advice, but sometimes hard to take it.
Well, you don't seem that shy, so I think you're getting better with it.
Yeah.
So I think next time you'll be able to ask her.
Yeah, I'll ask her. I'm
Yeah,
curious.
but I think you're amazing. I
Thank you. I
think
think you're
like
amazing too.